Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast for creators of any kind. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thanks so much for being here. Very much appreciate that. Fun episode for you this week. I try to have a fun episode every single week, but this one is also a fun one. You've heard her already, Jill Valentine. She chatted with us on the episode about comedy festivals. And she's from Chicago. She had a couple of festivals to talk about, the Women's Funny Festival and the Chicago Sketch Festival. So very cool that we had her on for that, but very cool that we're going to be chatting with her right now about all the work that she does. She does a ton of things. She's an actress, she's a writer, a director, and she's a director in a couple of ways. She directs sketches, but she's also the executive director at Stage 773 in Chicago. So lots to chat about with her, lots to learn about. It's a really good discussion. Let's get right to it. Here's my chat with Jill Valentine. Is it tough having the same name as a popular video game character? Because I imagine when you ask people to Google you, it can be kind of challenging.
Oh, my God. Yeah, we actually wrote a song about that in one of my shows.
Oh.
But only weird thing about it is that, like, sometimes I get, like, a weird guy that'll be like, hey, do you know Jill Valentine? And I'm like, yes. And then I just get the weirdest friend requests on Facebook or, like, Instagram, like, creepos, looking for Jill Valentine. Yeah.
The thing that's kind of sad about that, too, is that if somebody just sort of cosplayed as Jill Valentine and acted like they were a real person, they would get a ton of people who would be duped and thinking that that Jill Valentine was a real person.
Right, totally.
But you do comedy, not video games. And when did you get your start in comedy?
I feel like I've kind of always been a comedian, even as a kid. I was kind of the class clown growing up, and generally the class clown was a boy, so that was different. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just feel like I've been kind of, in that vein for my whole life. But when I started actually performing would be, I think, grammar school. I did like my first play, and once I heard the laughs, I was crazy about it. I was so excited. So, yeah, so I started theater pretty young.
And when did it become sort of, I guess, when did you start taking an approach to comedy that was more educational? I mean, obviously you were getting educated with theater things, but when did you start doing stuff at the theaters, the improv or comedy theaters?
Actually, when I was in high school, there was some Second City classes for high schoolers. And because I'm from the south side of Chicago, I was lucky enough to know about it at a young age. Mm-hmm. And so I started taking classes in high school.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yes. Getting in at a good impressionable age.
Right, yeah.
I know you have some I.O. experience. Were you taking classes there? Are you someone who goes to both theaters?
So at the time I went through Second City, and then I went through the conservatory, and then I was lucky enough to find my comedy family in a group called the Cupid Players, which is musical sketch comedy. And at that time in 1999, that really wasn't an art form at the time. Now it's a huge art form, but back in the day, we didn't really have musical sketch comedy. So when we started it, we were kind of the first, and so it kind of blew up. And in that, I met a lot of people that I still, am performing with and love and have been my comedy family. And so what happened was we opened a show at Second City, and it got extended and extended and extended. And then we went over to I.O. and showed Charna the show, and she loved it. And so we ran there for almost 10 years on an open run.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a heck of a run.
lots of shows. Yeah, it was a long run.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't
a
have
very
Saturdays
good
for a
time
long
to
time.
have a good run like that.
Yeah, yeah, we were really lucky because we got to, normally in this art form you do 8 weeks, you do 6 weeks, you do 4 weeks, you do one night, and in this we got to hone it and hone it and hone it and write and rewrite and come up with like a really good product that was selling out every week. So it was such a fun, exciting time.
Yeah, with the way improv and improv theaters and the sketch departments of these theaters, the way they've blown up the last few years, there's just a lot that people can see. But 15 years ago, for someone to or for a group to have that sort of success at that time, I mean, the cream of the crop was what was rising to the top at that time period, because theaters could say, well, we've got to, they could focus a certain way in education and also in adapting what's on their stage. And I think it's really impressive that you were doing that back then, because that was the time that all these people were coming out and doing big stuff.
Yeah, it was, I look back and, when you're in it, you're just doing it and that's what it is. But, I look back and those were some like really amazing years for us, like just a really fun, exciting time.
Oh, yeah. Any particular stories that really stick out about that time period?
At that time, we were just starting to hone the Chicago Sketch Comedy Festival. So the Cupid Players got to perform all across the country, which was really exciting because we were scouting other festivals that were happening at the time and learning from them. So we were at Miami Improv Festival, we were in Portland, we were in Seattle, we were in San Francisco, we went to South Carolina. So we performed kind of all over the country and just not only, learning about all the different comedy that was out there, nationally, but also how are they doing their festivals? What's the best way to do their festival? What can we take and learn from them? And also networking with other groups across the country so they would come to Chicago. So it was really, really cool that we had those opportunities.
Yeah. You focused mostly on sketch.
Yes, I did. Charna got me to do the Deltones, which is their main stage musical improv show.
Right.
And so I was terrified because it was like all the greats were on the stage at the time.
Yeah.
So like Blaine Swen, Lindsay Haley, Terry DeFrancisco, Rance Rizzuto, Joe Bill, like just huge names. And I was terrified. But I did do that. And so I ran with them for a couple of years, and that was just a ton of fun and terrifying. And because they were so good, you're learning and you have to be up to their caliber. So, so that was so much fun. And there's so many names I'm missing, like Craig Euler. There's, it was an awesome time.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that Charna got you to do it and almost sounded like she had to do some extra pep talking or something to sort of convince you to do it.
Yes. She told me I should do it, and I was like, oh my, I literally physically cried before the show. Like I was crying. I was so scared, and she was like, just get in the back and just, hum along and do some moves, like just be in the back. And I'm like, oh God, and the thing is, I knew I should do it. I knew I should, and I knew I could do it, but it was just so scary. So, yeah, I think like the first few months I did it, I think I was literally almost sick before shows. And then after I did it, I was fine, but it was, she had to push a little bit.
Right, yeah.
But I'm so glad I did. But yeah, I was terrified.
You've done a great deal of things, as we've already talked about, and you're one of the multi-hyphenates because you're an actor, you're a writer, you're a director, improv and sketch comedian. When did, obviously writing was coming in because you're doing sketch, but did directing start coming in at that point too, or is that something that came in a little later?
Well, with the Cupid Players, what was really exciting about that project is because it was so ensemble driven, I got to help kind of direct in that in that group. You can write, you can create your own music. Like it was really cool. So then from there, and being involved in Sketchfest, I met so many other sketch comedians and some younger groups too. And so I was asked to direct my first show, maybe 10 years ago, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. And so from there, I've directed a bunch. And it's just like a kind of a side thing that I love to do. And it's just interesting, putting a show together from that perspective,
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of a fluke. Someone asked me and I was like, okay. And then I tried it and, then you learn.
How would you define that difference between the perspectives there of putting a show together from a writing or acting standpoint to a director's standpoint?
I think because when you're writing it, you're inside of it, you're inside of a particular sketch, you're inside a particular moment. And from a director's standpoint, you're looking at it 30,000 feet from above. So you're looking at it as a whole. Is there a thematic, piece to this? Is there, are we trying to say something? Is there a stylized thing we're doing, So it's cool to look at it as a whole. And then also it's awesome to be like, okay, well, I'm done. Go on stage and do it. You get to walk and sit in the audience, That's always fun too.
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool to kind of put all the pieces together.
Do you prefer to do one of them at a time, or do you find that it actually helps to be able to do a few at a time? Like if you're either just writing or just directing, or writing and directing at the same time?
Like for instance, if I'm in a show, I would not like to direct it. I think an outside perspective is always good. But to me, I feel like the busier you are, the more you get done, with your time, the better you are, and the older you are. Like now, before festivals, we used to have like very long rehearsal processes. Now it's like, what can we get done in 4? What can we finish in 4? And you just get more like productive.
I bet.
With your time.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. One of the things I am interested in that you just mentioned was trying to get a show done when you have less time, because your time is now crucial because of the different things you're doing.
Yes.
How can an actor, and we could go through each of them, an actor, a writer, a director, get more prepared so that they can deliver when they have limited time?
I think the best thing to do is have a deadline, have something that scares the shit out of you, so you have to put something on stage. So fear is so motivating. So I would definitely have something terrifying at the end and then work your way backwards. So, from the performance, then you go back and you say a dress rehearsal, then you say memorized by this point, then you say written by this point, then you say choreographed by this point, you say any music, any technical aspect, all of that. So I always work back because I like to see the road, because if I don't see the road, I don't see a clear path. You know what I mean? Like to me, it makes me feel more comfortable saying, okay, I see a road. I see what needs to be done in each of these rehearsals, so that way I can get to that terrifying ending.
I just auditioned for a sketch team, and it's something that I sort of not until recently really thought, okay, let me try to do this. Do you have any advice for people who want to get on sketch teams as an actor or a writer? Do you have any advice for them for how they can improve? Because that is something that I personally would like to improve at. Watch
as much as you can. I think you learn so much from sitting in the audience. I know tech people that because they've watched 100 shows, they can walk on stage and kill it, with even less training, because they see what works and what doesn't. So I would say watch as much as you can. And I would say surround yourself with people that are better than you, if you can, because you will work up to, to their level. And then, I think throughout your journey, you find your tribe, you find your family, your comedy family, who works with you, who has the same funny as you, same work ethic. As you go through your comedy career, like at this point in my career, I work with people I love. and who I love having time with and who I enjoy, because no one's worth a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? No comedy. I don't care how good you are. If you're a pain in the ass, I don't want to work with you. You know what I mean? So through your time, you'll start finding those people that are just so like-minded, and you just have an amazing time with them on stage. That's what it's all about.
Exactly. Yeah. I like several things that you were saying in that, because for one, yeah, it's not worth the time, but then also it is all about the time that you're having on that stage. And if it's with the right people, then it's special, and that's why you wanted to get into it to begin with.
Right. No one's making $1 million. This is your,
right.
This is your side game, unless you're lucky enough for it to be your, full-time gig. So you have to have a great time doing it. If you're having a great time, the audience is having a great time, and your players are having a great time. Yeah,
for sure. Since, you've done so much, I assume you're doing some instructing as well. Are you doing any teaching of like sketch or anything?
I never was the teacher type. The only thing I've ever done teaching-wise is corporate training, improv in corporate training. And we kind of got it, me and my buddy Liz MacArthur, she and I were flying to different places and teaching improv in the workplace. And it was so cool. And I didn't think it would be. I was like, this is going to be weird. But it was awesome, because it really does, putting the yes in the workplace is really beneficial, and listening, because you don't understand how bad we are at listening, and supporting. So that would be the only way. I've done a little bit here and there, but that would be probably the extent of my teaching.
And I respect that, because a lot of people, it's not their bag, and they shouldn't feel like they have to do it. They're different,
right.
They're different things for people to do.
Right. I run a theater, Stage 773. So rather than teaching, that's my full-time job.
Yeah, and that's really neat. Let's talk a little bit about Stage 773, because you are the director of operations there. Let's talk about the history.
I got promoted.
Oh.
I'm executive director now.
Ooh, congrats.
Ooh, thank you.
Let's talk about the history of that and how you got involved there and how it all started.
Sure. So as I said, I started with the Chicago Sketch Comedy Festival and the Cupid Players. And then me and Brian, the other two Brians, we, as we were kind of navigating what we wanted to do, we decided we wanted to build a board and a business plan and have a home of our own. And so we did that. And we wrote our own business plan, and we got some funding, and then we were modeling our business plan off this place called the Theater Building, which had been a building since 1977. And for some reason, it was in the stars for us to have that building in particular. And when they were ready to be done with the building, we were ready to buy the building. And so we took over the operations of the building, and then we did a $1.5 million renovation because it needed some love. And now it's a 4-theater complex in Lakeview, and it's a non-for-profit. And, so there's 4 theaters, 7 nights a week, and we have all different types of art forms in the building, from dance to musicals to magic to burlesque to children's programming, just all sorts of arts organizations.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah,
and that's, like you said, it's a 4-theater complex, so there's so much that you can do there.
Totally.
And that people can take in.
Totally.
Now, let's get into a sort of process so that we can then try to demonstrate that at the end.
Okay.
A sketch seems like a good avenue to go down when talking about a process of creating something. When you come up with an idea for a sketch, what are if someone's trying to write something, they have an idea, but they just don't know really where to begin, or they just have the beginning and they don't know where to go from there. What are some steps that a person can take to really break an idea and make it work as a sketch?
Sometimes, say you're in a group, always bring it to the group, because 6 minds are better than one.
Yeah.
And even if that particular idea doesn't pop, maybe something else can, come from it. Someone can grab an idea from that, and that can work. Sometimes if something just has a hard start for me, I put it to the side and I start on something else. Because if I'm just sitting there and I keep butting my head and I'm alone, I move on. Sometimes it's just keep writing. And some little nugget will come from that. I think, everyone kind of has their own process. Me in particular, I bring it to, other writers that I know are great writers and get their perspective. And if not, then I just put it to the side and get to the next idea.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. Because I do get sort of bogged down, like if one idea isn't really working, then I can get to I just got to sit with it for a little bit longer, and that really hurts productivity.
Yeah, and if you keep butting your head and nothing's coming from it, because there's sometimes I'll have a sketch to the side. Like I was just looking at sketches that I wrote yesterday, and I'm like, oh, this is good. What happened with this? Or wow, this sparks a different idea. So like when you pick it up with fresh eyes, fresh perspective, something might come from it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is the challenge in creating anything, whether it's songs or sketches or jokes, is that you sort of have to kick your brain into gear so that it starts coming up with ideas, and then you're putting out ideas, and when one doesn't work, you have the capacity to move on. I think that is a big obstacle for people and a big speed bump, is that they stop having ideas because when they hit a wall with one idea, then they start, saying they suck and they can't do this.
Right.
And that really will stifle your creativity.
Totally.
Yeah. That is a thing that I've just heard from a lot of different kinds of creators, is that, even if it's bad, then they just sort of follow it through to what they can follow it through, and then they just move on. And
totally.
And that's part of the process.
Yes. When you see an improv group that's like an amazing improv group, and for some reason they get into like the worst possible situation of like, the dildo scene or whatever, the obvious awful scene, and they're laughing but they're writing it out and they're playing it because this is where they're supposed to go and this is where they're going. And, there's nothing funnier than that happening too,
Right.
Of just seeing where is this awful idea going, let's die and just see how this goes, But if you are stifled, if you're frustrated, it's good to it's okay, put it to the side. This is comedy. You know what I mean? This is like not, there's nothing serious about this. Put it to the side, get on to the next thing,
Right. That's I think really great advice. Now, when someone or when you're writing, do you have a way you try to break ideas down, or like a specific process, or is it just kind of coming natural?
I don't think there's a process. I think there are some writers that really do have a methodology to the way they kind of move through a script. I definitely don't. And I think it's because, I'm in a group called Off Broadway, which is burlesque parody sketch comedy, and there's musical sketch comedy component too. So writing songs, because I've written songs for so long, I get to the chorus. I get to the funny. I always know that the punchline is the fourth line. You know what I mean? So there's like, in that way, in writing songs, I know that I have to get to a punchline. So work up from the punchline. When I write just, two-person sketch comedy, maybe I go a little character-driven. I might write a little more character-driven, knowing the players, I think it depends on the project you're working on. At least for me, that's kind of how I roll. It depends on the project I'm writing for. But there's nothing like specific, like for instance, I'm in this group with this, I keep saying Liz MacArthur, but she wrote this sketch where literally we're in like neon glasses, and there's a toaster in between us, and then the heat is on. The song "The Heat Is On" is going on, and we put toast in the toaster, and we're dancing to it. Like, how do you write, in a specific method for that kind of sketch?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just depends on what kind of sketch, what you're writing for, what's the punchline, know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that point about how do you write that, it reminds me of some of Jerry Lewis's classic comedy bits where they're, like in, was it The Bellboy or The Bellhop, where there are a couple of scenes in that where you can't write that out. It's just like he walks across a room,
Exactly.
Or like the phone's ringing and he doesn't know which phone because there are 12 phones on the desk, like.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's totally character driven. If I write the lines out, but it's said like he would say it, if you're reading it, that's not funny. But once he's doing it, it's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. I think there's something like that in Anchorman, like one of the famous scenes, or the many famous scenes of that was when he's in the ATM, or not the ATM, the phone booth, and he's yelling about Baxter. I think Adam McKay said that in the script it just says Ron yells.
Totally.
So he's just saying, he's riffing, of course, but it's just like, you don't, reading that script, you don't go, oh, I can't wait till I see that scene, because it just,
totally,
who knows what that scene's going to be.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
What sort of advice do you have for someone who's just excited about the prospect of going into sketch comedy, or they want to move to Chicago and learn? What sort of advice do you have for them?
Anyone who wants to get into comedy, come to Chicago. I guess, like, overall, I would say, see as much as you can, take classes, round out your life, though. You know what I mean? Because if you're stuck in the theater all the time, your perspective is a theater. If you're traveling, if you're learning, if you're nerding out about this and that and this, you have so many perspectives and so much information to bring to a sketch, to bring to an improv, to bring references to. You know what I mean? I think some people get stuck inside a class or stuck inside a theater that round out your whole life. Learn as much as you can about as much as you can.
Yeah, that is pretty crucial advice, because otherwise you're just writing about the culture of comedy.
Totally.
And people talk about that with improv, where you're just doing improv about improv, but that can happen when all you're taking in is comedy and you're not taking in other things.
Yes, and then it's just funny to us,
Right.
It's not funny to the audience, right?
Right.
They don't get our inside jokes.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes, who knows what will spark an idea, but some of the classic sketches on SNL, some of those were because someone was watching some sort of war documentary, like it could be anything that sparks an idea, and it's because they're taking in other stuff.
Some of the best improvisers I've ever seen are the biggest nerds.
Oh, yeah.
They're like the weirdest, biggest, smartest nerds.
Yeah.
Like, I know they got their ass beat in high school. I know they did. And they are killing it on stage. You know what I mean? Like, they're just killing it. Because they're so intelligent, they're so smart, they can riff on anything and everything. And to watch those people kill it, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it can also be a little discouraging, because I'm like, well, I'm not that smart. But you can always educate yourself.
You can, but you're also smart about different things. Right. I am so smart about the Real Housewives of Atlanta, or whatever it is. Like, there's certain things I know so much about right now. Whatever you're interested in, you do know a lot about a lot of things, and that's what you should bring to the stage.
Absolutely. One of the things that you mentioned, and it's something that I've mentioned a bunch of times, and I've heard other people mention, is watching shows, because you'll learn a lot from it. What is it about that? Because now I've said it so much that I'm almost not sure how to advise someone to watch a show. So what is it we're looking for when we're watching a show to learn?
I think it's watch what works, watch what doesn't work, try to understand why it didn't work, and try to understand why it did work. I think, like, if you ever, I don't know if you've ever been in a position, obviously we all audition for things, you know? If you've ever been in a position of watching auditions or being on the other side of it, you understand so much more about what the audition should look like or shouldn't look like. It's just taking that perspective of being the audience, you know, and putting yourself back to watch it as a whole. I auditioned so much better after I was on the other side of it. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh, well, that's, you know, that's weird that that's happening, or that's awkward. Oh, that seems to go right. You know, so I think it's just whatever, you know, whatever's killing it. Why is it killing it? Why is this working? Why is this not working? And you'll start just seeing it, you know, because even us as comedians, as we watch a show, you wish you could watch, like, your mom would watch a show or your friends would watch a show who are not in comedy, just to enjoy it. But sometimes we don't watch that way. We watch with a different perspective.
Oh, yeah.
You know, breaking it down a little bit more. And I think that's okay, you know, and so it is about, again, watching what works and what doesn't.
Oh, yeah. And it's the funny thing about that is, because I've been trying to watch from that perspective of, like, let me learn since I was in junior high. And it did get to a point where sometimes you're not enjoying the show because you're watching it from the let me learn brain. And then you watch it a second time and you're laughing a bunch. But
totally.
I found that there's certain shows, 30 Rock was one like this for me, that my brain would just click off into paying attention as an audience member. And then I would get halfway into the episode, I was like, oh, this is so funny. Oh, this is exactly what I should be watching to learn from. But it's just like, it's so well put together that it just makes you start just watching it.
And enjoying it, yeah, which is nice. Because, you know, when they say, like, I went to Ireland one time, and this guy was like, oh, do you know there's this great comedy festival when you're there? And I'm like, why in the hell would I go see a comedy festival when I'm in Ireland? Yeah. And they're like, oh, because your business is funny. I get it. So your job is fun. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I guess from your perspective, you know, so it is about, like, you know, we watch with different eyes, you know, certain things. So in those comedy shows, we do watch with different eyes.
Yeah. It's good to take in some other stuff sometimes, too.
Totally.
Well, we've gotten to the end of the episode here where we can create something together, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. I do have, since you have such a great sketch mind, I use my notes on my iPhone to just jot down ideas. And I have a bunch of sketch ideas, but I've never sat down to try to write any. Maybe I can mention what the idea is, and you can say, well, maybe that'll work if you go in this direction, or I don't see if that could work. I don't know, whatever you would suggest. So I'll rattle off a couple. One is already my favorite. These are all ridiculous ideas from the last couple months. But one was an employee keeps using vulgar passwords to log in to their account, and HR finds out because of IT. So then they kind of get in trouble.
I love that. I love that.
Because, like, how could, like, they make you change the password every 30 days, and at some point you're just going to run out, and you just have to use ridiculous things, right?
Oh, I think the way I would do that is because I would maybe take HR out of it right away, and I would have, like, a new hire come in, and the new hire, you know, I see, like, 3 or 4 people on stage, like, so I would have a new hire come in, and they're like, oh, Bob, can Jennifer use your computer? It's like, yeah, no problem. And so then they're like, oh, it's password protective. And then, like, obviously he says something like, butt love in my jammies or whatever, something awful, something hilarious. And everyone just stops and looks, and he spells it out. You know, I don't know. I think it should just get worse. And maybe like the first one is just a little inappropriate, just like a little, like Oh,
Like people could
that's
maybe
weird.
just toss it off. It's like, oh, well, that's all right.
Right, yes, like something a little off, and then it just gets to where it's like the worst, like the worst. I love that idea. I think that's hilarious. I think that's
Okay.
great.
Great, thank you. And here's another
Yeah.
one. So those dog food commercials where they sit dog owners down and they say, what do you like? We have different brands here. We have what's in the food, but we're not going to show you what the brand is. We're going to show you what's in the dog food, and then the owner finds out like, oh, that's really terrible stuff. I wouldn't want to feed my dog that, and then they find out that that's their brand that they've been feeding their dog.
Okay.
So they show like what's in the food, and then the person's like, yeah, I'm going to go with whatever whatever it's called. The good one that's supposed to be so healthy for dogs. But then they say, like, now let's look in your food and see what's in your human food that you're feeding yourself.
Oh my God. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I don't know where to really. The angle to me is just like humans eat horribly, and here, like we shouldn't feed dogs
You know what?
bad
I could
food.
see that as a runner. I would see that as a runner. So
Okay.
I would do the first one like the regular commercial. So it's not funny, but it's a little like interesting. And then I would bring it back and do maybe the human, or is there a middle one? And what's even worse? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could even do what's in your baby food or what's in your adult food. You know what I mean? Like like something awful like in your baby. Like 'cause that's what you don't want to hurt babies and you don't want to hurt puppies. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to fuck with those. So I might do it as a runner and like have it get way more ridiculous.
Oh, okay.
Because you have to show how it's supposed to be and then you have to fuck with it.
Okay.
That's how I would maybe go with it.
Okay. And the last idea I'll share is some thieves have taken a victim hostage, and they're trying to get into this victim's bank account. So they got they're mean bad guys. They got a gun to the head, and they're getting their bank login info so they can steal their money. And they start asking the security questions, like your first pet's name or favorite movie. And so the thieves, when they say like, what's your favorite movie, and then they type the guy says it's this, then the thieves get sort of sidetracked. They're like, that's your favorite movie?
I
Like
love
it's a ridiculous movie
that.
for it's like I don't know.
love that.
That turn could be really funny.
Yes, because you know how they also ask like, where did you grow up? And they could be like, what? Do you know this guy? Like,
Oh,
like
yeah.
I'm trying to think of all the questions. Yeah, and like, total sidetrack.
It's like first car's like, oh, my dad had a Blazer when I was a kid.
Exactly. Yes, and then there has to be one that like just affects them like emotionally, where I think like I don't know what it is, but like, what's your mother's maiden name? Like you could do like, oh my God, like we know her, we blah, 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 or whatever. I think there should be like then come into some kind of conflict of we can't rob this guy. Like it just gets harder and harder to rob him because of his security questions. I think that's fun.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for the tips. There it is.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much for being on the podcast, Jill.
Yeah, no, it was so nice. I'm so happy to do it.
So glad to have her on. A big thanks to Jill Valentine for her time. And I hope you enjoyed that and learned a lot. I feel like there are a lot of really great tips in there and some good encouragement as well. So get out there, watch a bunch of stuff, but watch a variety of things. Don't just watch comedy. And if you are not in the comedy world, but you are trying to create something else or work on different things, again, like see where you can find inspiration in things that are not what you are working in, the medium that you're working in. Look at something else, watch something else, read something else, take in something completely different, and then maybe some ideas will get sparked. And that's what we need, It's what we're going for when we're trying to create stuff. You can find Jill Valentine online, but boy howdy, it's tough. I wanted to try out saying boy howdy, and I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think I liked it. I like it when other people say boy howdy. But no, I don't think it's for me. Anyway, you can find this Jill Valentine that I just chatted with on Twitter at Jill M. Valentine. Tons and tons of Jill Valentines on social media, and most of them are not real human people. You can also find Stage 773 on both Twitter and Facebook at Stage 773. And also on Twitter, you can find us at There It Is Pod. You can find me at Jason Farr Jokes. Head on over to Facebook and like us at There It Is Pod. Well, that's today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week's episode, I'm very excited to share with you a fun person I got to chat with. And we got a lot of fun things coming up. Well, until next time, folks, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.